did Trunks Got No Tax?
Pass it.
And Zibolai did Time Before, the one-take film.
I'm Judy-Go Wong, co-producer and many other hats with Zibo on A Time Before.
I'm Daniel Hamby, and I co-directed Doppelganger.
All right, so guys, step into the light. I'm sure you've told people that many times. There we go. All right, so I'm just gonna hit up one hitter-quitter question and then open it up to the audience because I'm sure you want more audience feedback. My question is, what was going on in your life at the time that you wrote the film, and how did that spill into the movie? I'm just more interested because I think art imitates life, and so what was some of the motivation going on personally that inspired you to create your film?
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, so around the time I made Doppelganger, I was working for a production company, and we were mostly just doing a lot of commercial work and kind of standard stuff. And the guy I co-directed with, Graham Mihalski, him and I worked together, and we were just dying to do something creative and different. And so we decided to just to play around with time, you know, kind of use that as like a way to do something that wasn't necessarily linear or just like fit in a box or anything like that. So, so yeah, that's kind of what was going on around the time I made Doppelganger.
So my story has no bearing on reality. It's not from any life experience or anything. I've always been a fan of one-take films, and I wanted to come up with a story that I feel like, well, what could I add to the one-take genre, you know, that hasn't been done before? So it was my fiance at the time, so we actually got married recently, but it has nothing to do with our history or anything. There's no, it's completely fictional.
So I put that together during the 2016 election, and it got to a point where I felt like you kind of had to say, well, they're both bad. There's no good choice. But I wanted to make the case that no, one is significantly worse than the other. Yeah. That's what I did.
Nice. All right, so I'm gonna open it up to the audience. If you got a question, just raise your hand. I'll come by.
Howdy. What were some of your obstacles in directing/producing these films?
How did you overcome?
I actually can't think of any obstacles. I wrote this song like in 20 minutes, and then got my friend Josh to do the character animation, and took about 3 days to make, and then uploaded it.
So, it was the first time doing one take, so there were a lot of obstacles. Just figuring out the logistics. How are we gonna move all the actors around, and then setting all the props. So Judy actually, with another PA, she reset all the decorations and the wardrobe, getting the makeup, and how are we gonna time all this so it can all be done in time and not be seen in the camera. So we spent a whole day of rehearsals just to figure out all the problems. But the hardest problem that we never even thought of, that actually we almost couldn't finish the film because the refrigerator is actually not magnetic. And we cannot find any way. We tried double-sided tape, we tried like sticky glue, we tried everything. And we had one take where it was the perfect take, but then the thing fell off right at the very end. So we couldn't use it. So we ended up trying all these bunch of things, and something finally worked and stuck.
There were a lot of obstacles. We only had a time frame of 2 weeks to do this. So casting was the very first one. And well, we were very fortunate and blessed with a great location. That house is a friend of mine's home, and he had LED lights built in his kitchen, which was so great. And I think after what we've been through, I would say one obstacle was not enough hands helping out because, you know, like I said, it was a very short time of putting all this together. And, you know, him and Shimon, his fiance, now wife, wrote this. And they brought it to me. I was like, wow, we only have 2 weeks to do this? Yeah. So we ended up having all those scenes that you've seen. There's 4 roses from, you know, standing up straight to wilting. I don't know if you actually could see all this, you know. And then the fact that them changing. We needed more people to help them change because we're running around that entire house because as he's walking around, we're doing certain things and hiding so, you know, we don't get seen. So there were a lot of challenges, but we did it. It was a great challenge for us all, but we did it, and that's a proud piece of ours. So thank you.
I would say for ours, it was just finding the time to do it. Just, you know, with work and everything, it's always hard to find the time to find a day to shoot and get everybody there, and then find time to edit everything. And then also, we didn't do any on-location sounds. All the sound you heard was in post. So putting all that together was fun. I don't know if it's the right word, but.
All right, do we have another?
What was your favorite shot from a technical perspective in each of your films?
So Daniel, like the opening shot is my favorite of your film.
Yeah, I mean the open shot is a good one. Probably from a technical standpoint, probably the one where you see the deer in the shot in the tunnel is probably the one I'm most impressed with myself with. We had several different shots of that, but we decided to go with the shakier of the shot because we thought if we could pull that off, it would help ground the effect in that shot. So.
For ours, it was the shot that you saw, because it was just one shot. So that was one that. So I mean, yeah, with these, it's like you have to find the balance, right? Because sometimes the shot might be technically better, but performance might be weaker, or you know something. So it's like finding. There were other takes, you know, where other things were better, but ultimately, felt like that was the one that had the best of everything.
I have to say, Josh, who did the character animation, did a really good job with the 2 characters because basically there's just one loop for each character, and I had to go in and edit just Hillary going like this and Trump jumping back and forth, and had to make it not distracting that there was only about 10 frames for each.
I had a quick question. First of all, the films were all fantastic. For all 4 of you, I was interested in what your inspirations have been, filmmaking-wise. In terms of, I specifically really was interested in a time before, specifically for you two. Was wondering what the underlying message there was. I understood that all 4 films had a really interesting relationship with time and how the playfulness with time and the way the relationships develop and the fragility of them. So I would like to really know a little more about not only your motivations and your inspirations behind each of your films, but also not that, but specifically what kind of relationship you have with time and relationships as a whole.
Well, the only inspiration for that I can think of, there's obviously Pinocchio, and then when I was designing it, I thought of David Firth, the animator. I can't remember exactly what about it made me think of David Firth, but his work is really good. If you haven't seen his work, you should definitely check it out.
Just some quick inspiration, like Hitchcock's always been a big favorite of mine, and then all the other famous one takes, and even like the shorter ones, like the one takes within films, like with Gravity, with Birdman, all these really long and impressive ones. So it was more of a challenge to see if I could pull it off.
An inspiration of ours also is we're with DC APA Film, and we wanted to star Asians.
I'd say as far as inspiration, you could probably look at to the things like the Twilight Zone, or even stuff you'd find maybe on like a No Sleep Reddit forum somewhere. That's just kind of the inspiration of the tone of film we wanted to make. I'd say sometimes it depends on the film itself, because some people do make short films for a concept for like a feature later on or something like that. For me personally, Doppelganger was just more of a fun experiment, just to play in that genre. But I could definitely see myself doing something similar in that vein in the future.
I personally don't see this going any further, or one shot, continuous shot.
This was just a
I'm not signing off for that.
one experiment kind of thing, but it is going to be released on Amazon Prime, so if you want to catch it again.
Just to watch it again to see all the details.
I would say Trump's got no tech. That's it. I just wanted to say something about 2016, and that's about it.
Well, let's give these filmmakers a round of applause.
Joe Jakevich, and I made Silent Sentinel, the one about the suffragists.
I'm Doug Phillips, and you have to guess which film I was involved with.
And we have one more. We have one more guest.
Hi, I'm Blvd, and I'm the writer-director of These Colors Don't Run.
All right, let's give him a round of sound, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give him a round of sound. All right, so day number 2, the opening films deal with intimate portraits, deeply personal stories that resonate. And I wanted to know and tell the audience, how does the story affect you personally? Can you talk to us about that, all three of you?
Well, I think I'm always trying to work out my own life with my work, and so, you know, I do think a lot about my very sort of religiously strict upbringing, and I think about women and girls' place in the world, and sort of the lingering effects of colonialism. I think about all these things, and somehow it gets baked into my work on some level.
Wonderful.
For me, I suppose it's being moved by the stories of the incredible courage that it took to bring about progress in this world, and in particular, the story of the suffragists and what they suffered to give women the vote. I'm kind of blown away by it and kind of horrified that the story's not better known.
When I went to Belarus, I did not know what I would find. I wanted to see places that I had heard about, that my grandfather had talked about. It was a surprise to meet my grandfather's sister's daughter, and everything I learned about the family was a surprise, I guess. Certainly, my grandfather never knew what happened to his family, so it was a discovery, and I wanted to share that discovery.
Well, that is wonderful. Well, when it comes to filmmaking, we always wanted to see a product from start to end, and I want to know from you, what was the process of making your films and bring it from the pre-production to what we saw on the big screen today?
I wrote the script for, actually, I suppose I can go back a little bit further. I sort of learned the story because my wife discovered this story and started painting paintings for it. She's an artist at the Workhouse Center of the Arts, where a lot of this stuff went on. I wrote the script and it was a finalist in the DC Shorts screenwriting competition in 2016. That was a real pleasure, and I got a chance to actually get some actors to read it in a table read. After that, you know, it's finding the locations was was the challenge. We were able to use the actual prison cells at the Lorton Workhouse Center of the Arts, which was pretty cool. And the cemetery we filmed it in was Congressional Cemetery, and they were incredibly welcoming, both of those people. Congressional Cemetery is where the story actually took place, so it was a real pleasure to go out there and film and say, oh yeah, well that grave was here when Doris Stevens came through, and that one wasn't, and things like that. Then it's just, couple of very cold nights in December and January, filming at an unheated prison in outside in a cemetery, and then months and months of post-production.
Well, I actually been to that Morton prison. It was a pretty interesting place, so I'm glad you picked that for your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
I have a slightly similar sort of trajectory. I had this short script was in an incubator through the National Association of Latino Independent Producers, NALIP, out in Los Angeles. So it was one of the final 12 projects, and if you won, you would get your film funded, basically. It did not get the funding. And so at that moment, I did think I should try and move my work forward. I had worked on other people's projects, but I'd never done my own. So I contacted the person who was my advisor in a Sundance lab I had been at that year, Michael Tully. He lived in Austin, Texas, and I thought Austin, Texas would be a great location to shoot the film because I could get Chicana actors, and he surprisingly said yes. So I flew out to Austin, and in 3 weeks, we got together an entire cast and crew. We shot the film, and I left with the actual celluloid film in a bag, and I checked it through in the airport. And then I got it processed here at Video and Film Solutions in North Bethesda, and just went through the entire post-production process, which took months and months and months.
Amazing.
In my case, it took years and years and years. I started working on the film when you could say, when I was a teenager, and I interviewed my grandfather. So it took about 40, 45 years to do. And my next project, I'm expecting to finish in 20 or less. But I interviewed my grandfather on audio tape because I wanted to be able to remember, I wanted to capture the stories that he was telling me, the things that he was telling me. I had a sense that they were, well, different from what other people's backgrounds might be in the circles that I was in, but also I had a feeling that maybe someday I'd want to be able to return to them. And then, of course, Belarus was part of the Soviet Union and very difficult to go to. Even after the fall of the Soviet Union, Belarus is still aligned with Russia, and still has it's one of the few countries that still has Lenin statues in the capital, and even has a statue of Felix Dzerzhinsky, who was one of the founders of the Soviet secret police. So actually getting to go there and getting to then go out to the village only became possible in recent years. But I really wanted to put it all together, and fortunately there's a lot of public domain material from that era, so I was able to draw on that as well.
That's very interesting. All right, we have time for a couple questions where anyone in our studio audience might ask questions, so I'm gonna come down to you. I feel like Bob Barker on The Price is Right a little bit. All righty, sir. What question you want to ask?
So, two questions for Via. Could you talk a little bit about, to the audience, about why you chose to shoot and film and any of the complications that came with it? And Joe, want to know what you think the women depicted in your film would have thought about the fact that in our last election, having a woman on the ballot, and that a large portion of women voters went the other way.
As far as shooting on film is concerned, it was not in the original plan, but my producer Michael Tully and my DP Yuta Yamaguchi had both shot on film before, and they came to me and said, most of this film is actually a memory from the past, and what do you think about shooting on film? And I was like, well, aesthetically I love it, but financially I don't know that I can fund that. So we started talking about that, and I had been at a different lab in Stowe, Vermont, Stowe Story Labs, like a few months before that. I had met a VP at Kodak named Ann Hubble, and I had been sort of working with her on this other project marginally. But we contacted her and asked how much it would cost to get 6 cans of film, and she cut us a very, very overly fair deal, and that made it a lot, easier to say yes to it. And as it turns out, if you're going to film on a sort of a high-end camera like an Arri, then shooting on digital, that is, then shooting on film would be somewhat comparable because it's going to cost less to rent the old film camera. I used a Super 16 Arriflex, and I didn't have to buy all of the SD cards, but I, of course, had to do all the developing digital transfer and all that stuff. So I think, you know, shooting on film was great as far as giving me that aesthetic feeling of memory, giving me that sort of grainier, dreamier quality that I really loved, but it is noisy. So you have to actually like put a sweater, a coat over the camera while it's filming because it's definitely noisy, and you have to work with that in post-production because you will hear it. And you don't get as many takes. You know, there was sometimes I was just doing one take. Overall, I think I did like a 6-to-1, but it's, yeah, you have to be extremely judicious. We almost ran out of film. Luckily, my second AC had some film ends in her freezer that she said her roommate would be psyched if we got rid of. So if that had happened, which it didn't, I would have had a little bit of film backup. But that was a scary moment for sure.
Here's something I don't entirely get. The women's movement, often the fiercest opponents of the women's movement are other women. And that's been the case pretty much all along. I mean, you don't see an African American heading the KKK, but the anti-suffragists, there were many leaders of the anti-suffrage movement that Alice Paul fought against who were women. And this has been the case all along. I mean, the ERA was defeated largely by a group led by a woman named Phyllis Schlafly. So I don't think Alice Paul would have been surprised to see a lot of women on the other side, though I'm sure she would have been disappointed.
All right, and unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. Let's thank our wonderful filmmakers for coming up for this session. Thank you all very much.
Changing the landscape of America with their circus-themed King Lear. And so we were like, that's the perfect fodder for like a weird web series about like narcissistic misfits who, you know, like I thought it was actually quite telling that the film like right before us has like all these beautiful ballet dancers, and then in ours you see me like struggle to literally get my knee above my waist. Which is not no, that's just me, so.
Nice. I don't know who played Abernathy O'Neill, but like just hearing his voice, I'm always, that dude cracks me up. All right, do we have any questions from the audience?
A question for Dave. How did you edit that? Were you editing the film?
I shot and edited it, and it was shot on film and then scanned to 5K digital by a company called Pro 8mm out in Beverly Hills. And then I edited it what's normal now digital editing. So.
Any other questions?
For Footprints in the Sand, was there any inspiration from The Office?
Oh yeah, well the shots are definitely, we got the cinematographer Dan is great, and Jeff, our director, wanted to do a lot of those quick zooms like on The Office they have, you know how when Jim is like, we always are quick zooming on Jim for his like reaction shot. And Dan has a lot of experience in reality television where they have to do a lot of those like quick zooms. So yeah, I'd say cinematography wise, definitely.
Hi. So this is more for Footprints in the Sand. In terms of building your web series out, how did you plan that arc? Like within each episode, within the entire series? Did you write the entire series in advance and then shoot it, or did you write it per episode?
We wrote the entire series first, and we shot the entire series over the course of 4 days. And then we released it all on the same day, sort of Netflix style, doing a whole season at once. And we were crazy ambitious and thought about writing like 3 seasons and shooting 3 seasons at once, and that was crazy. But we did shoot and write the entire first season all together. How many episodes? There are 11 episodes, I think, in the first season, and they are all on YouTube.
That needle shot with the candy, like, that looked really real. Did anyone die?
Nobody died. We had no. That was a gag. That was prosthetic arm, but we studied hard. I have some experience in that. I'm a recovering drug addict myself, so I know a little bit about that. And we had a consultant on set and a medic and everything, so there was no danger of anybody getting jabbed with sharps or anything like that.
So one question that I do have is, I think as filmmakers, you obviously, especially indie filmmakers, you gotta be passionate about what you're doing. And I think just to shoot on Super 8, that's, ambitious, and creating a web series is really ambitious as well. So, what kind of motivated you guys to create these films, but then also just like what motivates you as filmmakers to kind of put your art out to the world?
Well, it's hard, for that. For God of Hell, I liked the collaboration with Chris Shepard, in collaboration with other people, and I like the film aesthetic, and I like the mechanics behind film cameras. I love gadgetry and machines, anything that has moving parts. And as far as filmmaking in general, all the films that affect me and the stuff that I like to do are things that deal with inner struggle and turmoil and feelings. If I can watch anything, and I've sat here today and had tears well up on a lot of stuff I've seen. So to me, that's what draws me to filmmaking.
My man, Dave Perry. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Good answer.
You cried at ours, right? I'd say what motivated us was pure spite. No. Well, actually, no. So we started, we thought of this series almost 3 years ago, I'd say. And I think it was one of those stories that you really can't until you tell it. You need to exercise it from your soul. We had just this absurdity. It was just in us, and we needed to get it out on film. And I just think that we, despite, the fact that we, one, had no idea what we were doing. We were starting from square one as filmmakers. And two, we ran into so many roadblocks over the 3 years that we made this, but we just couldn't leave it alone until it was done. And I think that when you have a story like that, it's a really special thing for anyone who tells stories. And I hope it happens to us again. So, also spite.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Does anybody have a question? All right, so if you could just tell us how can people find you guys on social media, and what do you have planned next?
How dare you? You can find Footprints on the Sand on YouTube under Footprints in the Sand web series. You can also go to our website, watchfootprintsinthesand.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, all under Footprints in the Sand. Our next project, we are hoping to make Footprints in the Sand Season 2 as a team. And we all are also individual artists. So we all have our individual projects going on, and you can find more about those by looking at our individual social media stuff.
You can go to my website, daveperry.net, and there's links to social media on there to find out about me and portfolio and stuff. And I write a blog as well, related to creative endeavors. And the next thing for me is I have two music videos coming up, and then a feature slated for late spring, early summer.
All right, let's give them another round of applause. If you could just go down the line and just say your name and which film you're a part of.
Hi, my name is Anya Paul. I wrote and directed Last Night in Town.
Hi, I'm Lucas Ruderman. I directed Leaving Malcolm.
I'm Chad Eric Smith. I wrote and directed Rumination.
All right, so I'm gonna hit us with the first question, and then I'm gonna open it up to the audience. Love is a universal language, and I think that that's one thing that really came through in this block of films, right? What will we do for a loved one? So could you just talk a little bit about how love influenced your film?
For me, it was heartbreak, that started off with love. Rumination was inspired by my own personal experience with grief following a breakup a few years ago, and it feels like weeks ago. A few years ago, coupled with several conversations with my father about the idea of time travel being more of a matter of meditation and neuroscience as opposed to quantum physics. And so the screenplay was a cathartic way to help me heal through the process, and the character Elliot was a visual representation of me circa 2015. But then as I was writing it, I realized that it wouldn't be fair or personally gratifying if the character succeeded when I couldn't in real life. And so I instead made it a cautionary tale about what not to do, because rumination is not a positive thing, it's a symptom of depression or anxiety. And so instead of dwelling or ruminating on the past, it's probably best to be mindful, be present, and focus on the future.
Love between a family is really important. I was very fortunate to grow up in a family in which I was very loved and supported. And not everyone is. And people have to choose between following their dreams and creating a family. There's also both. There is a way to be able to follow your dreams and create a family successfully. And for Malcolm, it took a little bit of closure with his father to be able to get past that moment in his life. And I think that was the most important part of love in that filmmaking process.
What inspired Last Night in Town was something my grandmother said to me before she passed away a few years ago. She was married to my grandfather for 43 years, and they went through ups and downs, as one does in a long-term relationship. And my grandfather was caught cheating, and he was kind of involved in a very public scandal. And my grandmother had to decide whether she was going to stay with him or not, and she ended up doing that, and she stood by him, and he became a better father and husband as a result of this public disaster. And he passed away really suddenly, and my grandmother told me that she still talked to him. She had a framed picture of him by the window, and she said to me that she really regretted that she never told him that despite everything that happened in the past, she never told him that they had a really good life together. So I found that really devastating, because I only ever knew both of them as a really loving couple who supported each other. And so I wanted to confront, what do you do when you love someone who is really important to you, and knowing that you weren't the best version of yourself.
Snaps. All right, I'm gonna open it up to the crowd. Did anybody have a question?
Hi, I really love all your films. I was wondering where you guys got funding for your project, and if it was a hassle.
I basically write what I can afford. The first film I wrote and directed was called Dark Therapy. It was about a vampire who was afraid of blood. And I one day. And so that gave me the experience of knowing kind of what one day's worth of budget was. So when I wrote Rumination, which was like 6 to 7 pages, I said, okay, I could do this in 3 days, 3 times what I did in the last. So I just kind of did it that way. And so it was mostly my own money, about 70% of it. And then I sent like emails to like family and friends or people I thought cared about me. And with a PayPal link, and only a few of those people responded. And so, but those are the ones who really matter the most anyway. So, so it was difficult to get people to contribute. I didn't go like Kickstarter or GoFundMe, but it was mostly just out of my own pocket. And so it's a true passion project from beginning to end.
This was done on a very, very, very low budget of less than $1,000. And all came from my parents because it was all in food. That's what this is. 3 days of food, and my mother was the caterer as well as the writer of the film. And she did a wonderful job. I was very worried because it was 24 pages long. I said, Mom, there's no way we're going to be able to do this in 3 days for basically free. That's almost impossible. But we did it, and she wrote a beautiful story, and so she also had to help fund it. And the crew worked for food, and it was done as a student film, so they knew it wasn't going to be much more than that, and everybody worked really hard and really enjoyed the project. So it's tough to work on a low budget, really, really hard.
What they said. Well, you never have enough money and never enough time, and my film was my thesis film, so it was a school project, and the school gave me a budget, and it was not as generous as you might think because I essentially paid for it myself. So I specifically wrote for the budget, and I stayed within it. It was tough because I think we had to move half of our shoot because of rain. I shot it in Southern California. It never rains in Southern California except when you shoot 75% outside. And I didn't have any, I didn't want to spend any money in addition, so we had to, like everybody pulled together and made it work, but it was tough. I've never slept so little in my life. But it turned out okay. Somebody died.
We're about to probably hear a beep in a second. That means we're going to have 5 more minutes before the next film. So filmmakers, you might want to keep your answers concise.
Hi, I have a question for Reed and Malcolm. So I was just trying to understand the ending. Could you explain whether or not he died, whether that was a vision, whether that was...
Yeah, it's actually based very, very loosely on a true story. My great uncle or somebody in my family had encephalitis for months and was out cold, and they were ready to pull the plug, and one day he sat up on the edge of his bed playing the violin. So in real life, he was alive. In the story, because of the way we made the characters, I know you hate this, but it's more open to your interpretation. I didn't want to put a final answer on that because it doesn't matter whether he's alive or not. It has nothing to do with him. It has to do with Malcolm and what it meant to him to see him, whether he saw him in a dream or whether the kid was dreaming. I've gotten so many interpretations. So I'm so sorry. It's going to be up to you. I'm sorry.
All right, 5 minutes.
One thing I like about each of your films, you all dealt with perception, varying levels of perception, where you have characters who are seeing things that might not be apparent to an outside observer. Did you struggle during the creation process of how to reveal to the audience what might be real, what might be not? There's obviously a little bit of misdirection in each of your cases in terms of, as audience members, we start out thinking that these things are real and happening, and we gradually realize that those are based on the perceptions of some of the characters. The rumination was a little bit, it's sort of the mirror scene towards the end there, so that pays off. Did you struggle with how much to reveal to the audience and where to actually make sure the audience is keyed into the fact that things are a little bit different than you might be thinking?
I'll be very short about it to you. Incredibly difficult because in the writing process, I worked with my mother and we said, when are we going to have the grandfather be there? Should it be while he's also in the bed? And then when we showed the film, I got a billion of those questions. Like, was he actually just walking around, or what was going on? And it was very, very tough, and I was really hoping that somehow still people would kind of figure it out, and most of them did, but it was very difficult in the writing and also filming process for that exact question.
Yes, of course. I mean, even now after, there are certain pictures I can publicize because they will give away what happens in the end. And I think my struggle in the development of the film or in the script was, you want to mislead the audience, but you don't want to confuse them. There's a really fine line. You don't want to confuse them. So how much do you reveal at what point? And you also you shouldn't do too much of withholding of information, because then you're also going to lose the audience. So it was definitely a challenge. But
a chemical in LSD was one of the chemicals in the pill, lysergic acid. So, and then the mirror showed you one thing, but there was also something top secret in it too. So, yeah. So it was kind of both endings were both true.
Yeah, I don't want to risk it. Let's give them a round of applause. How you feeling?
So tell me, Kevin, how did the Rosebud Festival get started, and how did you get involved?
First off, it started in 1990. Natasha Reddick, I took over about 4 years ago. Good job.
Thanks, man.
So, wow. I like how you stole the power there in that moment. Completely honest.
Yeah, I've been working on this thing for 3 years. I'm almost done talking about it, so I'll do it for 20 more minutes. So
Yeah, you got to. Okay, so first thing, I got like my lineup of questions, but like I'm just watching the film again and seeing it on the big screen. This was your thesis film. Like, you broke all the rules on this. Like, I think the only thing you're missing is a kid in a pool.
animals.
Right, because it's
Cartoon animals, though.
That's true. I mean, so it's such an ambitious piece. What inspired you to create it? And again, like, let's give them a round of applause. Like, that was amazing. Thesis film. Thesis. That's crazy.
I have no common sense. I don't know. It's funny. I went to undergrad in the 90s, and it's funny. I have some friends from here tonight, by the way, which really quick. I have like friends and teachers and students, and like it's like being at a wedding. There are so many people from different walks of life tonight. I'm like, it's crazy. But yeah, friends from undergrad were like, "You've been talking about this since like the 90s, man." And I was like, "Have I? I don't remember." Probably because I was doing a lot of acid in the 90s. But it was a story I wanted to tell. The short version is I wanted to do a Squeaky Fromm story, and I was trying to find an entry point, and I found Paul Krasner's essay, and it resonated with me, and it resonated with where I was in my life. This is kind of all about leaving the past behind and overcoming this thing that you thought was going to be the big, I thought I'd be famous by now. I thought I'd be, when I was in my 20s, I thought I'd be in a different place than I am. And it was about becoming okay with that. And so this Krasner's essay and this gave me a chance to sort of dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm just listening to you, and I think we talked about this on my show as well, just in terms of how Manson, it definitely was a zeitgeist in its time, and now this isn't really as popular. So I am kind of wondering why that vehicle, to kind of tell that story and to want to tell that story especially now, and then the other thing you can kind of talk about is, Manson dying, over the course of you creating this film, right?
Yeah. Manson. Again, I'm a weird guy and I'm attracted to dark, sort of weird stuff. So there's that part of it, and I was always fascinated by Manson, and I became one of those people. Like, I have a shelf of books about Manson. I've read them all, and read all these articles, and I've watched 1,000 hours on YouTube, and so I've just, great with kids.
Excuse me. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So
that's why no kids were in the film.
Right. Restraining orders. But I just saw, with Squeaky Fromm in particular, I saw a strange humanity. I thought that she could have saved him, and she chose to embrace this crazy, alternative, radical life. And so I always saw it, but I sort of saw her as sort of this individual that could have maybe gotten him around the horn if she would have known how, if she wouldn't have been 20 years old. And I was just sort of fascinated by that. I was fascinated by all the girls who tried to help me when I was stupid, which is as recent as yesterday, I'm sure. But I mean, I just thought about that, and just thought about self-destruction, and then this whole just sort of sense of, I don't know, human frailty and human flaws. And I just think the older I get, the more I realize that the people that I admire that are in power, they don't know any more than I do. And that's scary, and that's sort of liberating at the same time, but it's also oh my God, we're all human. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Putin just needs a hug, right?
Right.
So, and that was sort of the thing of we can, one of the kind of undercurrent of the themes is we got to learn to love what we hate. And I don't know how we do that, but we got to learn, we have a lot of hate in the world. And I don't know, and I think the only way to fight it is with love. We got to figure out, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to go to somebody, I don't know how to go to somebody who wants to kill you because of the way you look and say, I want to try to love you, I want to help you, try to help you figure it out. I don't know how to do that, but that's somehow we got to figure that out, right?
Right. Most definitely, yeah.
I'm not trying to save the world or anything. I'm just trying,
But as filmmakers, that's what we do, right? We try to save the world through film. I'm gonna ask one more question, then I'll open it up to the audience. And there's gonna be the 5-minute buzzer thing, but we got a little bit more time because this is the feature. So the one question I did want to ask, in approaching it, especially in the political climate now for film, right? Writing these women, it's 3 women, 1 guy. I think you gave the women the power within the film, and you didn't make it a male fantasy or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about your process in doing that?
Sure.
Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
I think so. The film does not pass the Bechdel test, by the way. The girls really never talk to each other. It's all sort of filtered through him, if you kind of look at it, so it's interesting. So yeah, I went to this small liberal arts school in West Virginia, and it was a 3-to-1 girl-to-guy ratio. And so as a writer, you're writing stuff, you had to write roles for women. As you're a developing playwright, I had to write stuff for women. So I just sort of became my philosophy was, ultimately, we're both human. I think my emotional experience probably isn't that far removed from what a woman might be feeling, There was a whole social aspect when I was younger I wasn't aware of, and even, I think we've all become a lot more aware of recently, But I don't know. I wanted to, I think, again, we all have these things in common. We all have love, we all have fear, we all have, we all fear failure, we all fear that our lives don't matter, we all fear that, we want power, and then when we get power, we fear the responsibility of it. You know what I'm saying? I just think there are all these human things that transcend gender, they transcend race, they transcend everything, And I guess I don't know. I guess I don't separate it. This was based on sort of real people, so they just happened to be women, but I'm, it's me. This is my midlife crisis, right? You know what I'm saying? This is sort of me just expressing things, and each character was sort of a little bit, I could see aspects of my personality in all the characters.
Yeah. All right, let's open it up to the audience. Does anybody have a question?
Hi. So I really liked it. It was a great film. My question was more about magical realism, I guess. Did you use the LSE the acid as a tool to get to it, or did that, like, what came first, I guess?
It's a good question. So I've always played with dreams in other films I've done, and sort of this sort of weird magical realism, I guess, for lack of a better word. I think everybody's acid trip is different. If you've taken LSD, right? And so it's easy to like, that whole scene when they first take it, we go into the smoke and we go into the weird visuals. That's sort of the cliche acid imagery from like a movie, right? But like, it's not necessarily what you see. I wanted, I guess, to be as sort of practical in terms of, it's everything you see is sort of there, but it's altered because you've got crazy chemicals running through your spine, right? So I wanted to play with that. And in terms of, there's some symbolism in some of there's a lot of symbolism there. I tried to put subtext into that sort of magical realism. I'm not sure which came first. I mean, I could sit here for a half hour and tell you about the writing process and it would bore the tears off you, but I mean, like, the writing of it started in such a crazy place over here and then ended up here and went here, and we were literally rewriting it like while we were shooting in the edit, so it's hard to say what came first.
Questions?
So it's funny. The composer came in really late in the game, and we're kind of on a time. We wanted to hit all these festival deadlines, and we didn't have. I had another composer I've worked with for years, and he was going through some personal issues, and I sort of tried to hold the train, and keep him involved. And then the guy who composed it was this kid. I mean, he's 23 or whatever, but he was this guy out in L.A., and he's like, I can do it in the time, and I did a lot of homework. I kind of like, down to the time code, the frame, did like music cues for him and gave it to him. And then there's a handful of songs that I licensed, just indie songs that I really liked, that I've kind of been listening to. The closing credit song is from a friend of mine he's an Irish guy living in France, and he's got a band, and he's insane, and they make crazy, cool rock music. And I was like, oh, that's a cool song, So, but there were just a couple of these indie songs I liked, and a lot of temp tracks. And so like the Big Dreams and the Headlines at the end was a temp track, and I fell so in love with it in that moment, I just wanted to keep it.
So you certainly romanticized all of it, and it's your story, and that's cool. Did you have any other cautionary characters or tales besides the documentary filmmaker that got killed? And did you pull that back? Is that stuff left on the cutting room floor? I'm just wondering about introducing more ambiguity into it.
So yeah, you mean ambiguity in terms of his death or like crimes that the Manson family may have committed? The latter. So yeah, so again, sort of the original idea, the original concept was I wanted to follow Squeaky Fromm and Sandy Good from the moment that Manson was found guilty in 1971 to the moment Squeaky pulled a gun on Gerald Ford in 1975. That was the original sort of arc. And I started writing this crazy script. And it was built around, once I got the Krasner framework and I did it, I was 80 pages in, and we were at that scene with the filmmaker. And there were like scenes of like Krasner dropping acid with Groucho Marx and Sandy Good in San Francisco in 1967, and white supremacists getting out of jail and having sex with the man. It was insane. It was non-linear. The only thing I had, the whole thing was an experiment, and I wrote it as sort of this crazy. The only structure I had, I got so sick of like the fucking Save the Cat. I was so sick of structure and like all these like following the rules of writing. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to use this essay as a structure, and I'm just going to write what I want. And the structure's there for a reason, because I wrote 80 pages of madness. And if I would have finished the script, it would have been 250 pages long. And so it was like, I like this story. I need to pull this down into themes that I like. And I was like, what's important to me? What's important? I think what's important is, what do you do with your life when the big moments have passed? And I tapped into that and tried to pull that theme it around. Again, it was being rewritten as we were shooting. Like, we'd shoot things, and there were scenes that weren't working, and I was like, or ideas coming up, and it was wild. It was crazy.
Did you find that putting the acid surrealness made it harder to knit everything together in a cogent way as the audience sees it?
I mean, do you see it in a cogent way? I guess that's a first thing I would ask.
Actually, yeah. I felt like all of the acid pieces kind of.
I was very aware of. I had just been to film school, and I was very aware of sort of how text and subtext needed to work off each other. You know, I'm a big David Lynch fan, and David Lynch is like more subtext than text, right? Like the story is told within the subtext. And as filmmakers, or as film and audiences, I think we watch films textually, you know, most of the time. This is a very dialogue-heavy piece, and that was one thing. It was such a dialogue-heavy piece. Like when I first started writing it too, I was like, oh, is this a stage play? Is this, you know what I'm saying? Is this should this be? Would this work better as a stage play? And so the acid stuff was sort of to add a little bit of just visual subtext to a piece that was very dialogue driven for me. So it was a way to sort of make these ideas, to give them a sort of different, you know, give you as an audience a different entry point.
What was the damn word they argued about?
I asked Krasner. He never found out what it was. I don't know. I almost don't want to tell you what we said on set. We did have a word we used on set. I guess I could tell you. Do you not want to know? Yeah, okay. So many people are shaking their head. Oh, yeah, again, it's one of those things that it's sort of good for you maybe to interpret. You know, for the actors, we gave them a word, and they had a word that they used, so to give them sort of meaning to grasp onto. But yeah, Sasquatch, right? Who knows, right? But I've never found out. As far as we know, Lynn Fromm never told anybody what it really was. So.
Hi, your actors were fantastic. I thought you got great performances there. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if you have anything to say about that process or that you learned through doing it or about the casting, whatever.
I studied acting in undergrad. The casting was, I knew, I don't know, what's the best way to do it? I'm trying to give a short overall answer. Everybody sort of came to me in different ways. I hunted people down. Like Elliot had auditioned for me before, and he wasn't right for that, but I was like, this guy's good. I want to work with him later. Through researching him, I found Jen, who looked like Squeaky Fromm, and I was like, I'm going to bring her in to read, right? You know, Cindy, my wife, played Sandy, and we were really, and she produced the film, and did a lot of put up the wallpaper on the set, and did 8,000 other things as well, by the way. That's probably more her film than mine. We couldn't, I know that Sandy Good was like one of the characters I really wanted to have an impression of. I wanted to, like, if you watch video of her, it's like this gracious voice that's just like, it's wild. It's just this weird Midwest by West LA something, you know? And Cindy, like we were talking about, I was like, I'm gonna have a really hard time finding this. And Cindy worked for like 3 weeks to get this accent down. And when she got it, I'm like, I think you can do this. And then Sarah, we had worked with a bunch before, and I knew that she was amazing and could take the worst written role of the script and sort of add some things to it, which she did, you know. So it was, yeah, I don't know. What, give myself more credit? I mean, it was good, but I mean, I know. It was very collaborative, though. Like, the actors came in and worked, like, it was theirs. They put work into this. They did their research. They helped us. My scripts aren't precious things, man. I mean, the actors, well, let's come in and we're gonna do this together. We need to break it down and build it back up. Let's break it down and build it back up. Let's serve the story the best we can. And thankfully, I had actors that came in and they were unafraid to say, what about this? What about this? Have you thought about this? And I am confident enough in myself to say, all right, I don't need to be the guy who has the best idea in the room, you know? So I think that's how you do it.
So I don't know much about making films, and this film looked beautiful.
Thank
Is there something simple or concise you could say about what it takes to make a film look beautiful versus just like something you'd find on YouTube?
Hire this guy in the third row. I mean, yeah, I would say that, you know. We talked a lot about, I had a great team. I mean, the art, so much of it's in the art direction, you know, like I had a great art director with Yildiz, a great cinematographer, we had great gaffers. I think, you know, lighting is so important, and people who know how to manipulate light and paint with light is important. And I think it's just, we spent a lot of time we wanted to make pretty images. You know, we wanted to sort of all make it work, the camera and the lights, and we all wanted to make it work together. And I don't know. I'm gonna give all the credit to the camera guys and the art guys, and I mean they made it look beautiful. They just, you know, I just sort of, I created this crazy world for us to play in. So.
All right. So Lonnie, what's next? This was the world premiere. What's happening with the film? How can people check it out? And
Sleep is next. So we're gonna send around other festivals. It's submitted to a bunch of festivals now. The next round would probably be, if we get it accepted, would be April. We're not sending to any big festivals, and the idea is sort of we'd like to get it a nice size festival in like different markets. So like submit like place in Cleveland, St. Louis, LA, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and it'd be great to just kind of show it around. I think the goal, to me, this is like, if I was flipping through Netflix, I was looking for something to watch, and I found this, and after I watched, I'd be like, oh, that wasn't a waste of time. That was pretty good. What else is that, you know? I mean, I'd love to get it on Netflix. I'd love to be like people just to watch it, you know? That's sort of really the only goal. It's just to get it to watch, get people to watch it. So I'm excited to be at this part of it. I'm excited to sort of get it out into the world, and everybody laughed in like all these great places. It made me so happy that people laughed. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because like as a filmmaker, when you finally put it out in front of the audience, like I knew you were getting high off of that.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I loved every minute
right.
of that, so.
All right, so let's stay up here for some housekeeping. Guys, again, Rosebud Film Festival, this is the end of day 2. Let's give Lonnie a round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.